Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful in oil country and around the world. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Welcome, Bruce.
Morning, David.
So, Bruce, it's another day where three people who know very little about technology, me, you, and the ever trusty Craig Ellingson, who's the one of the journal editors who's in charge of these kinds of things. We're trying a little experiment here. We're trying to record on a whole new platform, Riverside.fm. And in theory, we're live right now, Bruce, on the internet. I'm just going to go have a look here and see if that's the case.
Live to YouTube.
Possibly. I'm not sure if this is working or not. Doesn't
It's
look like
working.
it's working to me.
It's working. You're
It's
live.
working?
Yeah.
Okay, we're live. There we go. So, Bruce, we somehow, and I think that now we can put that the three of us actually created the internet because we were able to figure this out on our resume. We can internet creators right at the top of the list. People able to figure out this kind of thing. All right, today, Bruce, we're going to
Al
talk
Gore.
about what's that? Yeah,
Oh, it was Al
that's right. That
Gore
was the
created the internet.
yeah, yeah. Well, the hell, his claim is just as tenuous as our own. We're we're going to talk about something just as tenuous as Al Gore's claim to creating the internet, which is the ongoing raging debate around the NHL, really just in Toronto, about whether Austin Matthews deserves the MVP award over Connor McMVP. This debate first flared up, Bruce, in about what 15 games into the season. I think Matthews he was off to a great start, as he often is. And let's to be completely honest, often Matthews has had one hell of a hockey season. He is a fantastic hockey player, and nobody in Edmonton, I don't think, denies that fact. But the debate flared
Yeah.
up with about 15 games into the season, then it completely died out, Bruce. Completely and utterly died out. But now it's back. And in Toronto. And I don't know how big a deal it is in Toronto, but Rick Zamperin of 900 CHML in Toronto, so a Toronto sports person of some type, who writes for globalnews.ca, which is a big news site. So that's why we're talking about this. Weighs in today, Bruce, and he makes the argument. Now he says he thinks McDavid is going to win, but he is making an argument, and his argument is thus: he says, "quote However, Toronto Maple Leafs sniper Austin Matthews is definitely giving his North Division rival a good run for his money and should be given serious consideration for the most prestigious individual award in all of hockey outside of the Conn Smythe Trophy as MVP of the Stanley Cup playoffs." All right, so let's go down, Bruce, and let's see what his argument is, okay? Uh, Here we go. Quote, "The league's top goal scorer, Matthews, is also making a compelling case for the Hart. The 23-year-old American has netted an impressive 39 goals in 48 games, including 18 in his last 18." And he's now ahead of that, right? This is written a couple days ago, I guess.
Yeah, he got one last
Matthews is
Sunday.
now at 40 goals in 49 games. He is averaging a ridiculous 0.81 goals per game, a number we haven't seen since the turn of the century. And it's funny, when I read that, I thought in 1900, but he's actually referring to 2000, obviously. The Maple Leaf star also leads the NHL with 12 game-winning goals and 29 even strength tallies this season. And Matthews has scored 22.4% of his team's goals, more than any other player on any team this season. Where would the Leafs be without their stud center? Likely not atop the All Canadian division. So far, Bruce, nothing. Any comments so far? Anything that you think is out of whack so far? Because I'm thinking
Not
this is
really.
all fair comment so far.
That's that's pretty much factual stuff.
Yeah. Now we get into some interesting stuff. Quote, "McDavid has 30 more points than Matthews this season, and that's a big spread. But the bulk of that difference has come via the power play, Bruce. The Oilers star has
Oh
a league
yeah.
leading 32 points with the man advantage compared to Matthews' 13. That gap is a testament to the talent level of the 24-year-old McDavid. But when we compare 5-on-5 statistics, the 30-point total point advantage that McDavid enjoys over Matthews shrinks dramatically. All right, let's deal with his argument, Bruce. So McDavid has 32 power play points, Matthews 13, but this is supposed to in some way weigh against Connor McDavid's MVP candidacy in favor of Matthews. What do you think of that kind of argument?
That kind of logic? Go figure.
Yeah,
McDavid runs a top of the charts power play, and Matthews really is mediocre at it. Therefore, vote for Matthews. Okay. I'm
there
not
is
buying. I
this
guess
weird.
obviously he's looking to narrow the gap between the 30 odd points that McDavid is Matthews to a lower number, which would still favor McDavid by a double digit margin. But it seems to me kind of a funny way to go about it. Our guy isn't that good on the power play, and the other guy is. Therefore, our guy deserves to be voted for.
This is an argument we see in different forms, Bruce. In many different forms. You know, you'll often go on Twitter and someone will be making the case about the value of a player, and they'll just go completely with 5-on-5 stats, leaving out any mention
Yep.
of power play
Special team.
or shorthanded play, and also cutting out what happens at the end of the game, where players can make game-winning plays and in overtime. So all of that is kind of forgotten, set aside. It's like power play goals somehow in this kind of frame only count for about half as much or like a third as much as real goals that scored at even strength. The only real goals, real men score at even strength. It's some kind of, fancy
Mm-hmm.
dancies that score on the power play. We can completely overlook that. It's not important. Now, that's an exaggeration of this point of view somewhat. But this argument doesn't hold any water. Power play goals that Connor McDavid scored have helped the Oilers win a lot of games this year. They helped Edmonton dominate the Ottawa Senators, for instance, something the Toronto Maple Leafs couldn't manage with Austin Matthews leading the way on their, somewhat less than stellar power play. I don't know where the Leafs rank in the power play overall, but I just don't see the argument having any real weight that's in Matthews' favor. What do you think about the argument, Bruce, that he outscores that it's closer? Not that Matthews outscores McDavid, but it's closer at even strength. What do you think about that?
Well, it's undeniable. I mean, he makes the case that McDavid, close to 20 points of McDavid's 30 plus point lead over Matthews has happened on the power play, but the other 10 plus has happened at even strength, 5-on-5. Uh, you can you want to split it into categories. Well, guess what? McDavid's ahead in this category, and McDavid's ahead in that category. I still don't see a case for Matthews there, unless you want to zero in only on goals. That's where you can make a case for Austin Matthews.
At even strength, Bruce, Connor McDavid is first in the NHL in even strength, or excuse me, 5-on-5 scoring. He has 3.5 points per 60. Number two is Brad Marchand, 3.3. Jason Spezza, 3.2. Mitch Marner, 3.1. And 3.1. So it's a fairly significant gap between McDavid and the rest of the NHL right now in terms of even strength scoring as well. So there's two categories that I think actually you can make an argument if you really wanted to dig into this. You could suggest, and it may be true because I can't speak to this, that Matthews is a phenomenal defensive hockey player and is significantly better than Connor McDavid in that area. Now he doesn't make that argument, but I did hear that argument. I think Cassie Campbell, if I'm not mistaken, kind of was indicating that earlier this year that she felt Matthews was a better all-around player, and the only way you can take that is he's better defensively because there's no way you can argue Matthews is a superior offensive player. So I'm not going to. Maybe that is the case that Matthews is like a Selke, not
Then
Selke.
give him the Selkie.
Yeah, the Selke Selke candidate on defense, and but that would also carry over to the MVP, if that were true. But we don't know if that's true or not. I mean, McDavid, I think, has had a pretty strong year defensively, Bruce. I think he's been more committed to defensive hockey, more intense about it, more focused on it. The number of times that Connor McDavid, for instance, this year has left a man open in the slot as compared to years previously, I think he's cut it in half, his rate. He's quite aware of that now, much more than in the past, and so I don't. I think he's. I would categorize him now as above average on defense, especially
Hmm.
competition that he faces. Your thoughts?
Yeah, McDavid's made real good progress in the two-way game this year, as well as uh, just at the offensive end of things. And I mean, if the Oilers play high risk hockey with McDavid out there, confident in the fact they're going to win that part of the game. And if his goals against per 60 is higher than other forwards on the team, but goals for per 60 is much higher, and the goal differential, which of course is the key stat, is very much to the positive side. And they do play that five-man unit that's very, very aggressive, and we see how aggressive they are in the neutral zone trying to win the puck back and counterattack, and every once in a while they get burned. I mean, you and I have talked about Tyson Barrie and his pinches more than a few times. And we usually talk about the ones that fail, but there are a lot of times that those pinches work, and the Oilers just either keep the puck in the offensive zone or keep the pressure on. And and every once in a while they'll get burned on the jailbreak. But I think McDavid's personally his two-way game has improved. I think Draisaitl's two-way game has improved. I think they've got a lot of a lot of positives going on. I mean, these are young players too, like Austin Matthews. I mean, we're talking about guys drafted in the middle of the last decade that are still in their young to mid 20s, and we still haven't seen the best of any of these players. I don't think, including Austin Matthews, who's a hell of a player and still gotten better.
Yeah, we haven't seen the best. I think we're seeing the best of them on the attack. This is an age
Maybe.
when players typically peak as offensive hockey players, but we have not seen the best of them as two-way hockey players, which typically happens in their your late 20s, early 30s, probably for the NHL superstars in terms of being their defensive hockey peaking. So you're right. That's a good point to make. Alrighty, Bruce. Well, we could there's one more, but I'm probably going to write about this. Someone was for the NHL.com site was doing, and I didn't send you this ahead of time, but they were doing a thing on fantasy projections of goalies for next year, like who's the best fantasy goalie to have on your team for next year. And it was very clear. This isn't like 5 years into the future. This was just next year. And they had a list
Okay.
of 25 goalies plus five or six other candidates. And guess who wasn't on the list?
Oh yeah. Either
Mike Smith.
either Oilers goalie. Yeah.
Either Oilers goalie, which is when you expand it to 30, I could see keeping Koskinen off the list. But if you're just looking for next year, so I might write about that. I just thought, like, that's interesting. I'll dig in. Maybe I'm not reading their methodology clearly enough, but
Well, he's too old, David. Right? I mean, he might die of old age in the summer, and then he wouldn't qualify for this list next year. I mean, I don't know. It's he's you would think shutting up the critics a little bit this year, and maybe he is a little bit, but he hasn't won them all over. Let's put it that way. And I mean, he's in the stage of his career where it's 1 year contracts to the end, and each year is a new adventure. I mean, he could sign a 1 year extension, and he could come back, and whatever edge he found this past summer that played so well this year, it might not be there next year. But I mean, I wouldn't rush to take him in my pool. In fact, nobody took Mike Smith in the pool that I am in, the goalies. But guess what? It was a mistake. We blew it as a group. One of us should have picked a guy.
yeah. And it's interesting.
I picked
I'm
Koskinen. I wish I picked Smith.
I'm the last person who should anyone for doubting Mike Smith because I doubted him, and So there you have it. A bit, there's it's a small group of Oiler fans who did not, is the truth. I'm also guilty, Bruce, of hockey ageism.
Hmm.
When typically when players in their late 20s or early 30s sign a long-term contract, I just think, why, team, why did you do that? Why did you offer that 7-year term with that amount of money? They're leaving their peak seasons, they're heading into their injury-ridden seasons. So in general, I'm always thinking that. But this is the problem with that kind of thinking. There are individual players who all the time defy those expectations,
Hmm.
and so you can't say with certainty like that this like the Ryan Smith signing, like when he left Edmonton and signed that contract. Patrick Elias was another example of a player who signed a contract and made good on it in their 30s, and I doubted both those contracts. I would say that Smith probably came close to making good on that deal, that he was a pretty decent player. For the vast majority of that contract, he was at least a second line forward, and Patrick Elias was probably a first line forward throughout most of that contract. So I get it wrong. Like when you generalize, uh, and you're certain that this particular individual player is going to fail because in general, players that age tend to decline. That's also faulty logic because individuals can defy the group all the time.
Well, I'll give you the name of Alex Ovechkin, who signed a 13-year contract, and whose 13-year contract is now up, and he might get a raise at the end of it. And he was getting paid like 9.5 million a year. Now that was a guy who lived up to the full length of that contract. On the other hand, I could probably list you five guys that signed contracts of that length. I'm thinking of guys like Zach Parise, who halfway, for the first few years covered the bet, but the damn contract was far, far too long for him. And I mean, in the case of the 13-year deals, I mean, it can really go sideways. They cut that down to 7 or 8 now, and even then, you get the situation where the guy does okay for 2 or 3 years, and then he collapses. And I mean, I don't have to mention any names beyond Milan Lucic or Kyle Turris as a couple of examples near and dear to Oilers fans' minds
I
that
think I
that
think those
crashed and burned on big contracts.
yeah. I think those big contracts, I think we called them Franzenstein contracts because they were, I think the first one was Johan Franzen of Detroit, and Ken Holland kind of invented this scheme
Well,
of giving that massive long contract with the lower term over time. And can you hear me, Bruce? You're frozen. Oh,
yeah.
there you go. You're frozen on the screen there. And then we saw some like Brad Richards, Vincent LeCavalier, and I think the worst one was Rick DiPietro, if I'm not mistaken, who signed like I think a 20-year deal and probably had one or two good years before got injured and couldn't perform anymore.
It's the Russian guy that Islanders got Milbury traded for from Ottawa. What the heck was his name? They
Grabowski?
traded.
No.
No, started with a Z. They traded. They
Oh,
traded Chera and the draft pick that became Spezza for him, and he just
Zamnov? Is
crashed.
that it? No.
No, no, that's the Winnipeg guy, and now I'm stuck
Oh,
on the same name. You know the guy, right?
uh,
I'll get him in a second. I used to have players' names at the front of mind.
everyone
He's he,
seems so
Alexei
promising. And
he's done such
Yashin.
oh, what's
he's
that,
done such a
Craig?
good job at this.
Alexei Yashin.
Alexei Yashin.
Yashin,
That was from
Yashin,
Craig
that's it.
Ellingson. Thanks, Craig. I don't know
Yeah,
if the people could hear Craig or not, but thanks for that, Craig.
yeah.
Alexei Yashin. Was that a real bad stinker of a deal?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'll get on cap friendly here.
He he went sideways.
This is
Yeah, it was 10 years and 90 million or something like that, and they bought out a big bunch of it, and they had to trade, like I say, Spezza and Chara. This is like how many years ago? That Chara's only been like a stud defenseman. Uh, 16 years since that happened. Spezza and Chara
yeah.
both still in the league, and the other guy, I think the tail of his contract kicking around in some manner.
It's
So,
kind of hard. It's the cap hit was $7.4 million a year. I don't know how long it went because 10 years at 7.4 million
Yeah.
per year was
There you
Yashin's
go.
contract, and they bought him out in 2007, and he signed that contract in 2005, I think. Or I might have that wrong. It's kind of hard to tell from Cap Friendly. Alrighty, Bruce. Well, I think we've tried this out, our experiment going live. I don't know what people thought of it. If you could hear us. Oh, you know what we didn't do, Bruce? We didn't look at the comments. I don't know, like I think I can look at the comments if I'm not mistaken. Let me give me this a try here.
See if there's live comments.
Yeah. Uh, I can't find any, but maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. So that's what we're hoping to do also, is to be able to look at comments, and maybe we can figure that
Yeah,
out as this goes along.
they can't hear me, by the way, guys, but I see the comments. They're coming, and there's 3 actually.
Oh,
Okay, so
all right.
we can interact with people. I mean, this is a test mission. It's like a firing off a rocket while pinning it down to the launch pad. We're not actually boosting it into orbit. We're just testing out the engines work, and so
And we saw all those.
we can promote it and get a lot more interaction, which is one of the goals for sure.
Yeah, and we've all seen from the Dragon rockets, sometimes they don't work, and it's right live and everyone's watching it and it blows up. Like, that's $1 billion mistake, or more than that probably. But we're risking everything here, Bruce, with this. That's all I'm saying. Anyway,
Well, I do have a couple of factoids back on the Austin Matthews.
go ahead.
Given that Matthews, I will concede he will win the Rocket Richard Trophy, and he will be the first Toronto Maple Leaf to lead the NHL in goals since Gay Stewart in 1945-46.
Holy moly.
So now, on the other hand, Toronto still has not had a scoring champion since Gordie Drillin in 1937-38, 82 seasons ago. And the Oilers have been in the league for exactly half of that amount of time, 41 seasons now, because of course one was lost. And in that time, the Oilers have had 11 full-on scoring champions, plus a 12th who led the league in points but lost the tiebreaker. So we give Toronto a 4-decade head start, and so my takeaway is, rather than dump on Austin Matthews, who's a hell of a hockey player, my choice is to celebrate the great stars that we've had here in Edmonton. We've been supremely lucky with some of the greatest players in the game.
You know who Toronto has had, Bruce, in that time period, and this is going back a ways too, but they have and this may seem a bit odd, but when I looked at NHL history, like how do players do in MVP voting? How do they do in Conn Smythe voting over time? So these two really important trophies in terms of determining
Right.
who observers at that time who were watching these games thought these are the best players that we're seeing, and we're voting for them right now. So this is, real-time observers in that moment who had the best knowledge of these players voting on them. And if you look at that, the player who doesn't have a lot of big reputation, but is won got a lot of MVP votes, Ted Kennedy. And when you factored it all in, he came out as the 10th greatest NHLer of all time, just going on MVP votes for playoffs and regular season. Actually, the playoff votes, the Conn Smythe Award came, I think, in the 60s. So before then, they didn't have one.
65 was the first one.
So someone went back. So this wasn't just observers at the time. So someone, I think it was the Hockey News, if I'm not mistaken,
It
went
was a
back
big project, yeah.
and they tried to piece out who should win the Conn Smythe Award in the past. So it's using that data as well. So there is some kind of, looking back in time. But yeah, Ted Kennedy, number 10. So here was it, and I did this as of February. This is a while ago. The voting was as of February. I did this 10 years ago. So some players will have crept up maybe into the top 10, like Ovechkin, for instance. But at that time, this list won't change that much. Gretzky was number 1. Gordie Howe, number 2, Lemieux, number 3, Beliveau, number 4, Orr, number 5, Shore, number 6, Richard, number 7, Hull, number 8, Yager, number 9, and Ted Kennedy, number 10.
Wow.
So he was a fantastic two-way hockey player who really did well in the playoffs, and is an underrated Toronto Maple Leaf superstar, which is maybe the
Well,
rarest creature of all.
Peter Kennedy he's actually the most recent Maple Leaf to lead the league in one of the main offensive categories, because he led the league in assists in 1950-51. So he's a little bit more current than Gay Stewart and Gordie Drillin. Of course, he tied Gordie Howe for the league lead in assists in 1950-51. I was just looking all this up. There was a Matthews thread on the Low Tide blog that I follow, and I thought, yeah, Toronto's pretty desperate to have a league leader in anything, and they finally got one, and he's a good player.
What about this argument, Bruce? Like, I can think one more argument from Austin Matthews, if you were to put your head to it, is that goal scoring, when it comes right down to it, is the single most important skill in hockey, and an argument that the player who leads the league in goals is like in soccer, in European football, for instance. Right now, I think it would be widely conceded by many players that Austin Matthews and McDavid would be just right in the running together. It would be neck and neck. Like, you'd have this guy who scores a lot. I don't know who maybe you compare. It'd be like Thierry Henry versus Zidane, right? Like the guy who both scores and assists, worth just the specialist scoring goals. But they place a ton more stock in just the person who finishes, to the point when you're watching those games and they show the highlights, they'll often, like, there might be some brilliant pass that creates the goal in the Premier League, and they don't even show the pass. They just show the guy scoring it. It's so fixated just on finishing. And if you take that mindset, and the hockey's not a whole lot different than soccer, the number of goals scored, it's probably twice as many per game, I'm guessing, maybe even more than that. But where the onus is on that goal scoring, if you took that mindset from European and you applied it to the NHL, you'd think, yeah, Austin Matthews is a very viable candidate. But we don't apply that, and maybe the NHL way of actually totaling up points and awarding glory for offensive play is superior. I actually think it's superior to the European model, where they just focus so much on goal scoring.
Yeah, well, the NASL, they used to give 2 points for a goal and 1 for an assist. And
There you
there's
go.
thought over the year, I think the WHA actually had thought about 3 for a goal, 2 for a first assist, 1 for a second assist, but then they realized that their records would not stack up against the NHL, so that they would all be discounted, that no one would ever say, well, Mark Tardif beat Phil Esposito's record for 152 points in the season, for instance, or that Bobby Hull, well, for goals, I guess it was a little more straightforward. He beat Esposito's record. But they decided, no, if we want to compete with the NHL, we have to keep some things constant. Nowadays, we have some of the hockey analytics focuses heavily on primary points, meaning the goal scorer or the first assist maker, the guy who passed the puck to the goal scorer, as being a special example. Well, not that long ago, Connor McDavid had a string of 27 consecutive points that were primary. He either scored the goal 10 times or he was the first playmaker 17 times out of 27 consecutive points that he scored, with no second assist in like 6 weeks or something, however long it takes McDavid to stack up 27 points. So if you take the primary points argument, McDavid's still going to come away as the big winner. So, and one more for McDavid. In the last 13 games, the Oilers have scored 43 goals, won 9 of the games. McDavid has 32 points out of 43 goals. 32 points. He's been on like 3/4 of the Oilers' goals for a month.
I always love it when he gets a cheapie assist, Bruce. When he gets a cheapie, I just love that, because he was in on so many great plays that don't end up as goals.
Right.
And it's pretty rare that he doesn't get a lot of cheapies. And I can see people thinking, defensemen tend to get a lot of these second assists, and
Hmm.
maybe about a third of the time they're not really that. They're just kind of rote passes, just basic passes that aren't, freeing the player up to get a goal in the scoring chance area. So, I can see why there's a bit of downgrading of second assists, but often second assists are just as crucial,
Sometimes,
just
yeah,
as
for
important,
sure.
if not more important. Like the stretch pass that sends the player in is just a huge play.
Hmm.
And we try to recognize this at the Cult of Hockey when we assess goals and who contributed to the goals. We also give credit to the player who's doing a total eclipse of the sun screen on the goalie, like Jesse
Hmm.
Puljujärvi or Alex Chason will do, and they create the goal. There's no goal without that play, but they don't ever get a point. And who I found, when you actually look at all the contributions to goals, the people who make contributions to goals that don't get recognized with points are players who screen the goalies and defensemen who pass the puck. They will often make a pass that's part of the integral to the play, but because it's the third assist, they don't
Right.
get a point. So those, in general, are the players who are downgraded in terms of point production. Forwards, it balances out. Forwards usually get all the points that they deserve if they've they get a few cheapies, but that's made up for with spectacular saves by goalies in at the other in the net.
Well, our system, I mean, the points that we will discount are most often second assists, where someone's made
Yes,
an absolutely rote play, and then two guys, made the pass into the slot, and the other guy put it in the net, and we only credit the two of them. Or even we credit another guy who did a screen, or maybe won a battle that created the possession in the first place. But the guy that,
yes,
the NHL system is automatic. Last three guys to touch the puck, regardless of importance to the sequence. They just do it that way. But we have a little bit more flexibility to try and determine whose play was crucially important to the scoring of the goal or the creating of the scoring chance.
and of course the downside of our system is that it's two people, you and I, doing our best
Hmm.
to make subjective calls on this and not always agreeing and hashing it out and trying to be. But I genuinely think, Bruce, that both of us are propelled by a sense of fairness and accuracy to get it to be fair to each individual player and to have a standard. And because we're always arguing about, okay, what is the standard? Is this past the standard for what is a grade A shot or not? And
Right.
what we're trying to do there is to be fair to individual players, and if one of us isn't, to have the other person call them on that and hash it out that way. So
But what we don't have is two people doing the same thing for the other team. So there's no baseline or anything. We're just
correct,
going from our own experience of having done this for quite a number of years now as to
decade,
what's a decent
yeah.
uh, um, expectation for players of a certain position, and you can certainly can compare within the team. And surprise, surprise, McDavid and Draisaitl are far in front in our categories as well. But we have no way to compare McDavid to Matthews
We don't. And I wish
using
I did.
our system. Yeah, no, me too. I wish it caught on a little more. What has caught on is grade A scoring chances, which we've been calling them for years. Now I'm hearing broadcasts everywhere. Well, they had these many grade A scoring chances. So there's our contribution, I think.
It's our
We may
influence.
we may
Well,
have, we may have been first.
you know what? And if that's our contribution to Hoxie lexicon, I think it's significant because I think the heart of the game, focusing on those plays. The highlights do. We do as
Hmm.
fans. Everybody does. The coaches do. That's what you look at, and that's what
Right.
you study if you want to. If you're going to study one thing in the game, like we don't have time to study all the things we'd love to study. Like I'd love to record every pass made, all the zone entries and exits. You just mentioned pinches. You just like it would be great to know. Okay, how many successful pinches does each order defenseman have, and how many
Hmm.
failed pinches do they have? Try to rate
Hmm.
that. There's all kinds of stuff to rate, but we don't have the time to do all that. So we just focus on this one thing, which we think is a very significant event in the game, and we want to try to understand that and report our findings.
We can't all be Corey Schneider. He counts everything. That guy's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's just that kind of dedication is impressive. Alrighty. Well, let's leave it there, Bruce. And hopefully this worked out. And we'll be trying it again, probably after the game tomorrow night, if I can figure it out on my own. So,
Yeah, well, I know, especially with these late games, and our many dedicated listeners and viewers, and thank you uh, for listening. Uh, Wait up sometimes for our thing to get up. Well, if it takes us 40 minutes to do a podcast, and only then do we post it from the beginning, well, that's more waiting. If they can tap into us live, we'll just have to make sure we don't make irreparable mistakes. So. Once in a long while, something happens, and a very technical issue or something. I mean, nobody ever
it's
drops bad words or anything.
it's mainly technical issues that we have.
It is.
I think yeah, yeah, we're talking hockey, so it's not that troublesome a
All words are
territory,
good when
generally
you're talking
speaking.
about hockey, anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and the odd clipboard might get some damage done to it, but that's about the extent of the violence on our show.
Mhm.
Bruce, thanks for talking today.
Yeah, thanks for listening, David, and maybe everyone. And Craig, hi, Craig.
I think
Thanks for
Craig's
listening.
gone now.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Oh,
still
he's
here.
he's still he's still.
They can hear me too. I didn't realize that.
Oh,
So
they can. Yeah. Okay. Thanks,
that's
Craig.
fine. I found that out in the chat.
There you go. Thank.
There's a bunch of comments. We can figure all this out down the line. Maybe at some point, David, you'll have 5 screens going, reading a chat, responding, doing this part.
I'm
Or
on the
maybe I'll stay
URL.
up till midnight. Maybe I'll stay up till midnight every night.
I'm on the URL for the podcast, Craig, and I just don't know why I can't see. I can see three thumbs up for it now, but I can't see any comments. So anyway, we'll see what
Oh,
happened there. And
Okay.
I don't know why I can't see that. All right. Thanks again, Bruce. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bruce. And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.